Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Claims Never Sleep. I'm your host, Meghan Henry, and today I'm joined by my partner, Dan. Hey, Dan, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Megan. Thanks so much for inviting me to join today.
Well, for full disclosure, actually, this has been happening in a lot of podcasts lately when I have on my co-host a lot of newbies coming on, testing out the waters of this podcasting I'm doing over here. So you are a newbie, and I promised you it would be no sweat.
Yes, I am a newbie, and so far so good. So I'm keeping my fingers.
Yeah, you had a little bit of surprise when I mentioned that maybe you were going to be on video. You're like, do I need to put on a suit and tie?
As you can see, I'm a little dressed down today, so I was like, oh, well, fortunately, I just put the jacket and tie over in the corner, so I guess
Yeah.
I could do it if we need to.
Yeah, no suit and tie necessary. But I pulled you on this podcast because today we have on Ricardo Shelton, and he's a claims manager at Security First Insurance, which writes policies, homeowners policies, in Florida only. And you, being the managing partner of our Orlando office, I said, do you want to come on and chat with Ricardo with me? And you graciously agreed to come
It's a huge
join on.
topic. Yeah, very relevant in Florida. I mean, I would say, my personal opinion is we're in an insurance crisis, particularly as it relates to property insurance, due to many factors. A lot of people moving to the state, a lot of claims relative to storms and issues like that. So I think it's very, very relevant and very today. Let's put it that way.
Absolutely. And then when I talked to Ricardo a few weeks ago, that's exactly why I wanted to have him come on. I'm like, because I hear a lot about it, but don't really know so much about it. So I thought it was a very timely topic to talk about. So with that, let's bring him in.
This is the Claims Never Sleep podcast, presented by Cruiser Mitchell, with your host, Meghan Henry.
Good morning, Ricardo. Welcome to the Claims Never Sleep. How are you today?
Well, how are you?
Good. I'm so happy to have you on. You and I talked, I guess it was like weeks and weeks ago. And I love chatting with you because, I don't personally practice in Florida, but that's why I brought Dan on because he's managing partner of our Orlando office. But I hear so much about, how bad Florida is and that all the insurers are pulling out of Florida. So then when you and I talked and you work for a Florida insurer on property issues, I'm like, I need Ricardo to come on and enlighten me to what's going on in Florida.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for having.
Yes. So before we dive into all of that, though, I get a lot of people on this podcast, and everyone is, people are in claims or they're attorneys or they're claims adjacent, and I just love hearing everyone's story as to how they got to where they are, because I have yet to meet anybody who comes on and said, I wanted to go into claims and that's what I ended. I paved a path and that's what I wanted to do. Most people end up there very accidentally. So I'm curious, what your path was to where you are now.
Yeah. So, as with most people, it's never quite linear getting into the insurance industry. But I started right out of high school. I went into the Navy, served up and down the East Coast, and went to Annapolis for a bit. But once I left the Navy, I got out and I got a degree in sports medicine, actually. I started working with a local doctor in the Daytona area who actually purchased a gym. With my background, I went to run that gym for him. And then during that time, I finished my MBA. And while completing my MBA, I just really realized I had an interest in insurance. After that, I still continued for a couple more years in the gym industry, ran some other gyms, went to nonprofit side, ran a local YMCA. But the more I talked to people, the more I felt an interest for insurance. Finally, then landed a claims position, actually just starting as an examiner and then working through daily claims into complex claims, and then now into leadership role here. So.
I'm interested though about your background in fitness though, because from when I was in college, I remember I also had this idea that maybe I would go in to be like a personal trainer. I never did it, but I had some friends from college who did. And it's a hard industry as well. You know, it sounds like super fun, but you have to really like hustle to get your own clients and get people in, and you know, it's not easy.
It's a huge hustle. From the personal training side, it's a big hustle. Then you go into the operation side of the business, and then you're into, just like with policies of insurance, you got a retention that you have to keep. It's much harder to get new business than it is to keep that retention factor. So keeping those numbers and those metrics up, it is really, it's a 24/7 business. You are really pushing it everywhere in every aspect of your life. There's really not a stop when you're in that industry.
Yeah.
Ricardo, let me just say thank you for your service, by the way.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And when you know, in the personal training industry, like how did you go about, you know, how did you go about like getting your clients and like pulling them in your funnel, so to speak?
Yeah, so a lot of that is relationship driven, right? Mm-hmm. So it's connecting with people. I'm thankful. When I started, I was with that local doctor, so a lot of them were coming from a step down rehab program.
Okay.
And then, you know, connecting with their family members as well, to be able to grow that. And then when I got into running the gym locally, we were able to grow it and then expand it. And then when I went to the YMCA, it was just in a leadership role with the local YMCA.
And so how did you how did you transition into insurance from there? Because that's a shift.
It's a huge shift. Again, that is just as I was with the Y having a board of directors, a handful of my board were in the insurance industry in various capacities, and then just started to talk with them and then networked with that. And then I saw the opportunity to get into an entry-level claims position, which started from there, and then just went through that whole program and then continued there. And I got into complex claims, which it was actually early 2000, and that was late 2020. So the landscape was pretty crazy here in Florida. Mm-hmm. We were just getting into 2021. We had SB 76 come out, which changed some stuff drastically with insurance and allowed us to have a second look at claim there with that. And but through all that, I was in the complex department pre-litigation, just seeing how we can handle these claims before they actually go into full litigation. So
we probably have a lot of listeners out there who aren't familiar with Florida legislation. So when you're saying SB 76, what is that? Because I don't know what it is either.
Yeah, so that's Senate Bill 76. It was passed in July of 2021. And that bill, one of the things that they passed in that is that you need to provide a notice of intent to litigate 10 business days prior to filing a lawsuit with a carrier. So it really gives carrier that chance to have that second look and see if the decision was correct or not on those claims there.
And so how did you find I'm getting feedback, sorry. I don't know if anyone else is getting feedback, but I am. Like hearing things. So I want to back up though too, because I'm just looking at your timing when you left the Y and you transitioned out in December of 2019, which is probably really good timing for you to get out of the fitness industry right before COVID, because then during that year thereafter probably would have been a very slow or difficult year. So you probably transitioned. Did you know was it like were you thinking about that at the time, or was it just accidental?
It was just totally accidental. Thankful, I guess, basically, because I've seen some of my friends that stayed in the industry. Of course, retention rates in the industry once COVID hit just dropped drastically. It was so when I was in the gym industry, I got out of the Navy in late of 2008, which our economy was struggling at that time, and then 4 years later is when I got into the gym industry, and most of them were still recouping from what happened in 2008, and so same thing kind of happened here with a reset in 2020 as well. So a lot of people canceled their memberships or put their memberships on pause, and really it came back a lot quicker than from 2008, but they're still feeling that there as well. Still, it's almost back as from the numbers and statistics I have read, but it's still not where it was right there before 2020.
Yeah, I was definitely one of the ones that canceled, and I haven't gone back. Now I just work out at home.
Yeah, there's so many apps now, and then of course, the equipment that you can purchase to work at home, and it is pretty. I have it at home as well. So
yeah, I mean, I mean, I had a Peloton since like 2016, but then that went just like skyrocketed.
It skyrocketed. Yeah, we have our Peloton. My wife uses it probably daily there. So
yeah, I try to as well. So tell me a little bit though about you go into insurance, and tell me about did you start you go right into security first, right?
Yeah.
And did you start? You said you started off with complex claims. Were you in property claims or?
Yeah. So we are a Florida-based, Florida-only property carrier here. So that's all we do is P&C here in Florida. So yeah, I came out as literally a claims examiner trainee. Actually, it was a pretty long course, but when I was coming out, right when we went. COVID hit, and then we went home. So literally remote, and just I was getting my first claims just there at my house trying to figure it out. I think the class that we had came out a little stronger because we had to figure out a lot on our own, and really learn that landscape of how to handle a claim. We couldn't refer to our supervisors or managers at the time to be able to. Especially when stuff was escalated, we're at home, and sometimes when you're issuing these coverage decisions, especially with someone's house and their property, it can get pretty emotional. So if the policy doesn't lead to coverage, you had to find a ways to de-escalate that. And being at home, it can be kind of solo practice. With that. So.
Yeah, it can be kind of lonely though too. And also, it must have been a challenge. You're coming in, it's a new job, you're learning, and you don't have the benefit of being in an office to kind of bounce things off people, and you don't really know anybody yet either. Right. So, so how did you navigate that? Did you just have to kind of become, online friends with people and bounce off that way?
Yeah, that's exactly. I mean, we had morning meetings with teams and stand up and that. But yeah, it really became like having online friends. And we just, the cohort that I had at the time, we just really relied on each other for teamwork there.
So what would you say, though, were some of the bigger challenges that you'd see though, like when you say the claims are very emotional, like what are some of the challenges you see with these homeowners claims, and the emotion attached to it? Is it, it's just because it's your home, and particularly during COVID, it was difficult to have people come out and, have repairs done and that, so what were you seeing at the time?
So especially in 2020, we had a huge influx of convective storms here in Florida. So there weren't any super major hurricanes at that time. We were cleaning up some hurricanes from the past couple of years, but for the most part, 2020 had a ton of convective storms. which are just really large storms that come through on a regular basis. It just was more significant than other years. So we just had an influx of, a lot of times there are weather claims related to roof and exterior damage of the home there with that. And then just the cost of a roof in general for people, they don't usually have that type of savings to be able to re-roof their house. So they're depending on us to be able to help with that. So.
Yeah. Yeah. And so when you talk about the, like, cause on my end, like I'm not in Florida. So all I hear, we hear about just hurricanes. So, and you kind of forget about, regular terrible weather, that can affect people. But, but we also, in this time have seen some pretty massive hurricanes too. So what has been, the fallout from that you've seen on your end as far as claims?
Right. So hurricanes, a lot of the big issue you've seen in the landscape of Florida is reinsurance. So of course, insurance for insurance carriers, and with the reinsurance, that is what we primarily have hurricane coverage for. So reinsurance usually kicks in with that. The problem is just as the landscape has is the third-party representatives, the assignment of benefits that come out of that, the public adjusters that also go basically door knocking at the time, that create more claims than necessarily necessary for during those times.
Yeah, so let's talk about that, because you and I talked about that on the phone. Because I think people have heard rumblings of this, but if you're not in it, you don't totally know. So you're saying that public adjusters would go like door to door and like almost like say, "Hey, I think you have a claim for this," or like, how did it work?
Yeah, so multiple ways, but it could be just a roofing company that gets a referral fee to a public adjuster or third-party representative there. So they go door to door and say, "Hey, I'll inspect your roof." And ultimately, insured never even made aware that, they didn't see any shingles in their yard. They don't have any leaking. And these people then go on the roof and basically find storm damage there. But with that, they refer them out to a public adjuster. And then they kind of will say that they'll handle the claim from start to finish for them. And at that time, the insured, they will kind of wipe their hands of it and just let that public adjuster handle the claim for them and never make them aware of that whole process. And ultimately, until they actually get a copy of that estimate, they see how large or exacerbated they are at times for simple damage to the home there.
It's interesting, Megan, I received a call just the other day from a roofing company saying, come inspect your. So it's funny to hear Ricardo say that now, kind of connecting the dots. They wanted to come out and inspect my roof, and presumably they would find hail damage or something.
Right.
I know Ricardo from the water fountain talk that in Florida, it's called the free roof, right? I get a free roof because I paid my premiums for X number of years.
Exactly. That's what their thought process is. And it can be very simple damage, and which not necessarily, our landscape has changed and the laws have changed recently, but before minimal damage that could be repaired was ultimately constituting a full replacement of these roofs. In many other states, you can do a simple repair and then but now, like previously, we had to completely replace these roofs on these homes.
So has your company, I'm sorry, Megan.
No, go ahead.
Has your company seen the ripple effect? Well, that's my word, but from these free roof, I get a free roof, to what the premiums are now that you're forced to charge people in Florida?
Absolutely. So it's a direct reflect of our premiums, and it really, over the years, the premiums have increased drastically because of that.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, that's what Dan and I were chatting about too, that he's seen, his own premiums, skyrocket.
Yeah, 50% double. And we're thankful here that we were able to get a little bit ahead of the curve and not have to file for rate increases. But I've seen recently there's some carriers that have recently filed, 20-30% additional just this year. Still, they're still trying to get ahead of that. So.
Have you seen the legislation have any positive effect? And by positive, I mean starting to either mitigate against those premium increases or even start to bring them down?
Yeah, so the special session from 2022, the Senate Bill 2A there, that was passed. But from that special session with the timeline of reporting, I think that's been huge to see that. This past year, the claim count has started to drop pretty significantly from what I'm seeing there.
So kind of forecasting forward, do you think that Floridians have hope that our premiums will start to come down a little bit?
Absolutely. It's going to take a little bit more time, especially as we work through the current litigation and claims that we have. But I think within the next couple of years, you're going to see a big change with that. So
Dan's asking for a friend.
Me too.
My insurance, I was telling Megan before we got out today, my homeowners insurance probably doubled, Ricardo. I'm not kidding you. I was shocked. I rarely get sticker shock, I'll be honest, but when I saw the bill come across my desk, my wife and I just bought a new house. We don't live on the ocean. Mm-hmm. We don't live in a low-lying, high-risk area, and I was sticker shocked.
Yeah, my previous carrier was one that actually went out of business. And when the new carrier, when it came up for renewal, it was 50% higher than my previous there. My wife and I just bought a new home as well. So thankfully, right now it's pretty low with my new premium. But yeah, I felt that with the previous home.
Yeah.
Now, did you find, or have you seen like an influx of, an increase in insureds now that a lot of insurers have pulled out of Florida? Are you seeing like an increase in how many people you have at Security First?
It's been a lot of them that once they pulled out. Another big issue with Florida is Citizens Reinsurance. So Citizens Insurance, which is our state-funded insurer there, a lot of them went to that. The premiums are so much lower because they didn't have to, their increases are mandated by statute. So they can only increase a little bit where, our private carriers in Florida have gone up 50%, doubled their premiums, where they can only have a small increase there. So a lot of them were able to qualify for that and went to Citizens, which now is trying to do a depopulation. But
yeah,
and there's been recent news where they may not have enough money if there becomes a catastrophe there.
Right, like that.
It's really concerning. So,
and I mean, I can imagine as an insured, like being on that type of plan is risky for that very reason. That I don't know. I don't know if I'd feel comfortable that if something catastrophic were to happen, that it would be covered.
Yeah, I think I don't know if this statistic is correct, but I believe Citizens was up to 1.4 million policies that they had here in Florida alone. So
yeah. So, so let's talk about, the types of like your claims that you're seeing though. I mean, I imagine that on your end, are you dealing with a lot of coverage evaluations and then the claims?
Yeah. So for me and my team, we're primarily daily claims. So we handle your daily weather events to your internal losses as well. So your water claims for pipe leaks and ACs, things of that nature there with that.
So take me through go ahead, Dan.
Oh, I'm sorry, man. How difficult do you find those internal claims? I've seen them from my perspective, as an attorney, I've seen those claims kind of escalate. So in other words, somebody has a leaky sink in the kitchen, it ruins a little bit of flooring, maybe a cabinet, something that would be a relatively quick fix, relatively minimal, and all of a sudden somebody's putting in a request for an entire new kitchen. Are you seeing those things, and how are you addressing them?
So we enlist pretty general contractors pretty quickly here on my teams, and able for them to get us estimates that they're able to actually complete the work on those claims. But those claims have such more of an emotional value to the insured. The average person comes out of their house in the morning, they go to work, and then they go right back in their house. They don't see the outside of their home. They see the inside every day. So, and it's not a problem until it's a problem. So you may have a slow leak under your cabinet, and then you don't see it, and then you go pick out a cleaning rag that you need for that day, and then you finally see that leak, and then you're seeing the mold behind the cabinet, and then it's been leaking for a long time. A lot of times with mold, it can, certain molds can come pretty quickly, but a lot of them very scientific based, and you can depending on the type of mold, you can find how long it takes for it to grow, upwards of 60, 90 days with a consistent leak there. And people just have so much more emotional value. It's their home, they're seeing that every day, so then they see damage like that. That's where it really becomes a problem. And then they get into the cabinets that in general you would think could be repaired, but because they filed a claim now, nothing matches, and they need all new cabinetry and new countertops, and then that goes into the damage of the flooring, removing the cabinetry, and then they need to replace the flooring. It becomes continuous in the home, and then the whole home needs new flooring across there as well. So
yeah. And do you find though with that some people may take advantage of having the claim out there to be able to do some of those extra renovations that may or may not actually be connected to the initial leak?
Yeah, so I guess there's just cash register honesty is a good saying, but a lot of people see that and they're like, well, maybe this will be covered as well, and it just kind of trickles effects, and it really just ultimately most people just want their home back to the way it was, but you do have those that really kind of one bad apple ruins the bunch. So it's here and there, and those are the ones that do get escalated, and the ones that probably Dan sees more often than not are the ones that ultimately get escalated. The majority of them we're able to get a coverage decision pretty quickly and get those claims moving forward there.
It's funny to me because a few years ago we had a leak in our basement, and I remember being like, oh, okay, well, maybe we can get new flooring in our basement. And the leak itself was contained to one area of the basement. I was like, okay, that's all it is, and that was the end of it. I was like, all right, well, no new flooring in my basement for me. But it's interesting to me that might not be some people might not be satisfied. Be like, no, I everything needs to get fixed now, and it's just a different. I guess it's hard for me because it's not how I was like, oh, cool, all right. I guess I'm, that's it. The damage is contained to this one area, but I think there's others that will just push it a little bit and 16 steps further.
They do. And those, I mean, I think they're the minority of the bunch, but they're the ones that end up being escalated and become the majority of the trouble. So,
yeah, I think the justification is just, look, I paid premiums for so many years.
Mm-hmm.
They start multiplying those numbers, and it's almost like, well, I'm entitled to this now because
Correct.
I've done that. And, I do think it is the minority of the people. How many, you mentioned before, Ricardo, the public adjusters. Are you seeing that with respect to the internal claims as well? Because I have seen them with respect to what I call enhanced damages. So, for example, I get an estimate from a public adjuster on behalf of an insured, and I look at it and I look at the let's just say I'm trying to think of the term, it just escaped my mind, the insulation. Mm-hmm. And they're using R50, right? Instead of, whatever's required by the law or the building code
mm-hmm.
For that particular structure. And unless you know that, right? Unless you're have that advanced knowledge, which is, this is the code and this is what's required versus this is what they're saying, because they're building in money. So mm-hmm. you have to be in that position to address those issues too, right?
Yeah. So just so often that's one of the biggest issues, is just them exacerbating those estimates. So it's as simple, and if you look at the estimate, the line items on the estimate face value look pretty normal, right? But then you start looking at what they are, and they're using higher grade items and higher grade flooring, and it's just a simple click of the estimating software that upgrades that stuff. But the line item itself by itself looks pretty normal there. What happens in this past year, assignment of benefits went away, but in Florida, we had a huge issue with assignment of benefits. And you may have a leak at your home, and then you call a plumber out, and that plumber was connected to a public adjuster, and they're connected to a water mitigation company. They have referral fees and different things that they would do there. And with that, the plumber would tell you, hey, you probably have a claim here, and then we can handle that claim for you from start to finish. So next thing you know, even when they're signing the plumber's paperwork, they're also signing an agreement with a public adjuster. And through that public adjuster gets on that home and then files the claim, and then starts that whole process with that.
Well, and do you think a lot of, or some of the challenges come that, people aren't always familiar with having a claim? It's not mm-hmm. commonplace, right? I mean, if they are familiar, I think that's a red flag too. But, the folks that aren't familiar, they're like, oh, okay, I guess I have to, kind of just blindly kind of run down a road, and in a way can get taken advantage of.
They do. So yeah, your average person just sees what they see on TV or the billboards out there, ultimately saying that the insurance companies don't pay, or they're going to deny their claims. So the marketing out there has really done a good job to paint a picture against the insurance company, where really everyone that I've come across that is on this side basically is here to get an insured back to whole and fix the issues that they had to their home, provided that the policy has coverage for those items. And so often than not, that picture is we never pay enough, or it's not enough to do the work there. And I think we can always try and do a better job of explaining that. And often I tell my team, when they're talking to insureds and, setting the expectations of a new claim and how the process is going to work, that they're there to find coverage for them. And they're going to look at every avenue to try and provide coverage. If it's not there, they're not able to. But if they can, they're going to try their best to find that coverage.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because I've always wanted to ask this question of somebody in the insurance industry. So you don't have to answer it with respect to your company, but maybe if you've heard rumblings of it, we are the billboard capital, right? Everywhere we drive, there's a Dan got me, not this Dan, but Dan got me, or some of the other big firms, advertising their winnings. Have you ever heard of the insurance industry or within the group of some sort of counter billboard campaign or even a webinar to educate? We're sort of talking about educating the general public. They're being educated arguably by these billboards from the plaintiffs' lawyers, but have you heard anything of trying to educate either through billboards or webinars the general public about what really goes on when you file an insurance claim?
I think I haven't heard of that. That's been on my mind too. Like, how can we be out there? Our company specifically has, we try and get a proactive approach. So if we, just like with the roofers out there, if we see there was big hail in an area, we have our field adjusters out there that very next day, and we have their list of policies that are in that area, and they will go check those homes. So we've tried to start a more proactive approach past couple years. But ultimately, I think insurance as a whole, if there was a way we can actually get out there and trying to educate the insureds more on that as well.
Yeah, I mean, even if you had a big billboard between the groups and said, click here to educate yourself or something, I think it'd be great. I mean, I think a lot of people are genuinely curious, and I think they may say, oh, this is, what happens. Now, I guess you could say, well, it might foster more claims. I guess you could make that argument, right? But at the same time, I think maybe it would bring some balance to that constant infiltration of we can get you X dollars and all that stuff.
Right. Yeah.
Well, I think part of the challenge, though, too, is insurance policies for the general reader are very confusing. And I think that a lot of insureds can feel as though maybe they are getting taken advantage of because they don't understand the policy. And it's just like, we get it, right? We understand what it means, but like, actual cost value, replacement cost value, like depreciation, like I think to the average person that it's like, I don't understand what all this means. It's all very confusing. And even I'm sure you and your team try to explain it, but it might sound like Greek.
Very true. And part of that, insureds ultimately go to an agent, and that agent, they tell them they need an insurance policy to be able to get their home. And some of that, depending on where they qualify for that mortgage, determines, what policy they can get for that home. So sometimes they just want the cheapest coverage to be able to obtain that loan. And with that, they tell them it's full coverage, right? All the time I hear, I have full coverage. Well, yes, you have coverage, but there's just so many nuances, like you said, whether it's ACV or RCV, and you have full water coverage or you have a limited water coverage. And that's not always fully explained when they get that policy. They're just looking at that premium amount that will roll up into their mortgage.
Yeah. And I imagine, especially like the first time home buyers, that, you're pouring your entire life savings into this, and any added cost, you're like, I didn't, maybe you didn't think about it, or you didn't plan for it, or, you probably are looking for, the lowest possible number to add on to that number that you're looking at, just because, you're going down this road of a giant expense that, you hadn't had before.
Correct. Yeah.
So, I want to get back to like the legislative changes, though. So, because since there have been improvements or changes to the legislation, are you seeing now like a decrease in the value of claims because you're not having the door knock the door knock claims happening anymore, or what are you seeing on your end?
Yeah, so I mean, we're starting to see them trending, the other direction now. It's still going to take a couple years for that to really see the full effects of everything, but it has moved more toward that. You're seeing less of that with the door knocks. AOBs became completely invalid for policies renewed there in January 2023. So there's still some AOBs with dates of loss from previous that are still coming through, but and state of Florida recognizes lawsuits up for 5 years. So it's going to take a little bit of time for that to fully wash out there.
Yeah.
Talk to us a little bit about the attorney's fee side of that. So my understanding of the legislation, the most recent round was that the legislature decided to take away the ability to recover attorney's fees on a insurance claim, for example. Yeah. So how do you feel like that has impacted you? If you know, I know that's relatively new.
No, so that's huge. That just as big as the assignment of benefits being eliminated with that one-way attorney fees, and attorney fees in general have been taken away there as well. So what we're really looking at on new suits is just, did we pay what we owed, and not necessarily if attorney fees are applicable, which has some companies in Florida that were on the plaintiff side have really stopped filing the suits there. So they've kind of switched and from what I've heard, even completely stopped their property and casualty divisions altogether.
So it sounds like the number of claims are trending downward, but I assume the value of the claims may be actually going up. And the only reason I say that is because of the increase for building supplies, for labor. Is that an accurate assessment?
That is, yeah. So all of that is kind of trending in the same direction. The amount of lawsuits we're seeing drop as well, and the severity of the claims are decreasing also.
Now, with your claims, do you handle mostly the pre-suit litigation, or are you still involved if it goes into litigation?
So still involved with that. So my team will handle the claim from start to finish unless it fully goes into litigation there. So we've kind of switched a little bit, but we'll take that there as well. So.
And is it accurate to say, like, a lot of the claims that you're seeing that go into litigation are those ones that we were talking about earlier, the ones that get escalated to the point that maybe someone is taking an opportunity to do a full-on renovation outside of the actual damage that was incurred?
Oh yeah, there's always those, right? They're always going to be the ones that will try to take advantage of. For the most part, the majority of claims are the ones that just accept what we're able to create an estimate and find the solutions for them and get their claims settled, or we have our vendor networks that are able to actually complete the repairs. Ultimately, that's our goal is just to bring them back to whole. So
but the litigated claims, like what are you seeing when the claims go into litigation? What kind of claims are those that you see more often than not?
So a lot of those are either ACV roofs where their actual cash value and having that type of policy, they want that replacement cost on their roof, but their policies just don't provide that. That's a big one we see. We see just a claim where there's just no coverage provided by their policy. So those are more apt to actually go into litigation as well.
Yeah. So one thing I wanted to talk about though too is that you have a team, correct, of people. So how do you go about working with and educating your team you know, and handling the emotion side that you get from insureds, because it's got to be hard on your end, because you have someone who's very emotional about something that happened to their home, and you have to kind of straddle a line a little bit about, okay, while you feel for them too, like you can't just give coverage for things that aren't covered, and so, but it's hard. I'm sure there's a lot of unhappy homeowners who might yell at you, or or call you names, or whatever it may be. So like, how do you go about talking to your team and educating your team on how to handle the emotions that you might have from some of your insureds?
Yeah, so it's constant coaching and working with them. With my team, I have daily morning huddles. We will, as a team, we will roundtable claims or concerns they have, policy issues, because if they have that question, someone else may have the same question. So bringing those up as a team and how to handle them, and just using examples of how other team members have handled those in the past, give people little coaching insights in how to address that with their insureds. And then ultimately, I mean, the examiners sometimes are in a way like first responders, right? These people have a disaster that's happened to their home, so they just have to be empathetic and listen sometimes. Not necessarily even speaking at all, just being able to sit there and listen to the insured, especially on that initial call, really setting them up for the expectations of how their claim's going to go, who's coming to inspect their home, and keeping them informed through that process. I think that's so key, is just that communication aspect. It is in any relationship, but one of the keys to handling a claim effectively is that communication through the whole process. So you get new documents in, you acknowledge them, and you respond to them, and just keeping the insured informed through that. Hey, I've received this, and then I'll have it reviewed in so many days there, and just that whole communication is huge.
It's funny that you mentioned that your examiners being kind of like first responders. I recently recorded a podcast with a woman who actually, she used to be a 911 operator, and now is in claims, and I'm like, I never would have thought such a, like, I'm like, it kind of goes together, because you have to really be able to listen, and it's like a sounding board for your insureds, and just like just let them go and get it all out of there, and but you are listening to them in a time of distress and need, so being that ear is very important.
Yeah, it's key, and just having that initial ear to lean on and make them feel comfortable that we're going to do what we can by the policy to be able to get them back to whole, can set the whole tone for that whole claim process. Letting them know that we're here to find them coverage. We're going to try our best. Just kind of puts them at ease, because again, they all they know are these billboards or what they see in the news, and they have a whole different aspect of, and are even apprehensive to even call us. They think we're going to be negative from the get-go. So to be able to set those expectations can kind of, I think that's key, just in educating them in general about the claims process and insurance as well.
Yeah, it's like you have to kind of change the dialogue or the messaging that's out there. I recently had this conversation with my neighbor who had a tree fall on her home over the summer, and she was working with her insurance company, and now she's getting her siding done and noticed a leak, and now she's like nervous about going back to the insurance company. I'm like, well, you gotta just let I'm like, they're not working against you; they're going to work with you as much as you can. You didn't cause the leak.
Exactly. Yeah. Those are the instances that happen. I mean, there are many claims where at face value you see a small portion of damage, and then it happens a lot with roofs. Until we take that roof off, we don't know how that decking is going to be underneath there. So we can have a lot of rotten wood under there that we have to replace as well. So those things just come up through the whole process, and they just need to be addressed.
one thing I'm curious about, because I don't know, I feel like I get approached by it a lot, is those, I don't know if it happens in Florida, but the solar companies that come at you and they're like, oh, do you need a new roof? Well, if you get solar, we can get you a new roof for free. And I remember a few years ago, we did need a new roof. So I looked into it. It was almost as if they like leased your roof. And is that something that comes up in your jurisdiction too? Because I remember looking at it and be like, this doesn't seem like a good idea. I might need a new roof, but I don't want the solar company to have rights over my roof too.
So the solar companies are being more and more aggressive. I've seen them even in my neighborhood recently, that they're coming door to door, and they lease everything that they do, from the roof to the solar panels there. And a lot of people don't realize, but when you put the solar on, I mean, that's just that many more screws being bolted into your roof. It's pretty concerning to me as well.
Yeah, and I see the energy benefit, but go ahead, Dan.
Because you just put more ways for the water to get through. It's the same thing with people who put solar on for their pool.
Mm-hmm.
I had a pool at a time when my kids were young. I did it, but you got to know going into it that you're just penetrating through the shingle, through the underlayment, through the decking, and you're possibly causing an avenue for water infiltration.
Yeah.
So I don't think people think that way necessarily.
No, I think they're thinking I want a roof for free. And I think that's probably the door knocking. I think that's why it's so appealing, because it is a big cost. And when you have someone be like, hey, I think I can get this for you for free, or we had this hailstorm, there might be damage up there, and most people aren't going up on the roof and looking. They don't know what they're looking for. I know years ago in New Jersey, we had a whole issue with fraud with all that. People would say the siding companies would come out and they would make hail, like they would mark the siding and be like, oh, look, you have this hail damage. And then you'd submit a claim to your insurance company, and then you'd get the money to replace it. But it was a big fraud scheme, but the homeowners were stuck in the middle of it most of the time, I would hope, unknowing that the damage is being created by these people coming by and being like, oh yeah, I think I get you free siding on your home.
Yeah.
Is that something that you encounter too, those types of fraudulent type those companies trying to create fraudulent claims?
There are some that will generate those type of claims but they're more the minority than the norm.
I hope so.
I do too. And when we see that, hopefully our experts that are out there inspecting the roof can kind of see those patterns, and then we of course will have to involve SIU and things of that nature. And it just really the ones who don't benefit from that are the insured. So a lot of times they're not even knowing of these even issues out there, and then they have to, their claim process just becomes that much longer, and it's really unfortunate situation there.
Yeah. So how do you ever see the two, complete, fraudulent claims on behalf of the insured themselves?
Again, just they're out there, that they happen, but it really is the minority of the claims. It's not anything that we see often with that. Most people really have a legitimate issue, and they just want their home to be fixed.
So not many, like, someone lights their garage on fire, so so they get a new house. Nothing many of those. Is there anything that comes to mind of advice that you could give to homeowners as for like mitigating potential claims?
Yeah, I think just really it comes down to just maintenance of your home, but it is, being able to walk your home. So a lot of people don't do, they go to work, come home, and then go back to work, and they don't see much more than the front of their house. So just spending that time to walk your properties, and same inside. Look, if you have a bathroom you don't use regularly, flush those toilets, turn on the pipes in those bathrooms, check under the cabinets, and one of the big things is changing your AC filters, so often people forget to regularly change their AC filters, which then can cause leaks as well. So a lot of it is just preventative maintenance, just by and having a caulk gun handy around the house can fix a lot of issues too.
Yeah, my AC heating company, thankfully I'm on a schedule because otherwise that filter would never get changed. I'm not doing it.
Well, having that regular maintenance. ACs are running, 24/7, 8 months, 9 months out of the year. So what I always say is a simple cup of vinegar will go a long way, because you can pour it down your little drain. It doesn't do any damage. People sometimes say, "Oh, I use bleach." I say, "Don't use bleach," because you damage the piping. But vinegar is a beautiful thing. You take a little bit of vinegar, even hot water, and just flush it down there. It flushes out your drip pipe, and you can avoid a lot of damage, because if that backs up, I've had water in my garage. I mean, just nuisances. I mean, nothing beyond that. Clean it up, I vacuum it up, but it's just like you were saying. I mean, it's just taking care of the home and doing preventive maintenance.
Yeah, and the vinegar is very true. It my AC unit has a big sticker from the manufacturer to use vinegar, and it has a big arrow that points to the line to put the vinegar in. And what a lot of people don't realize, the majority of bleach you buy is water. So vinegar is so effective if you had any type of mold issues there, to use it against the mold, whereas water is what helps mold grow. So it's really not what you should be using bleach on mold issues as well.
Huh. Well, that's a good tip. I didn't know this. But I'm in New Jersey. We don't run our air as much as you Floridians do.
Yeah. Most of the year, for sure, right, Dan?
Oh yeah. We got to stay cool. It's just too hot most of the year.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's why I typically only go down to Florida between the month of October and like April. I stay away in the summer.
You and everybody else. Spring break is going on now. It just started, so we're starting to see influx of kids. They should be out your way too, Ricardo, out in Daytona Beach. I saw a reporter reporting yesterday that I guess the governor's asked the Florida Highway Patrol to help with policing beaches and things like that.
Yeah. So it's funny. Usually spring break starts right here at the end of bike week. So bike week's wrapping up this weekend, and now spring break kind of starts.
Yeah. And what's this? I think I saw something about Miami. Like Miami's like canceling spring break. I'm like, can a city do that? I saw something yesterday that they're really discouraging, which I get, but I'm like, I don't think you can control that.
Last couple of years, they had some issues, so they've enacted some curfews and things of that nature that
probably smart.
Discourage some of that.
Yeah, my mom has a place in Siesta Key, and I love Siesta Key, but I don't love it during spring break, because it's like it's supposed to be this very like easy, nice family place to go, and then suddenly during that time it's like there's like, I'm like, what are these spring breakers doing in Siesta Key? This is supposed to be like a sleepy town.
Well, that's why I think the local governments are trying to trim it back a little bit. And if you listen to the local sheriff, who was Volusia County, he was very stern on TV. I'm sure more stern, hoping that people would, but he said, look, if you're illegal drinking, you're going to get locked up. If you're using illegal drugs, you're going to get locked up. I mean, he was very straightforward about it, because there are unfortunately negatives that come with that. I mean, it does feed the economy, and it does, bring in some fun and excitement, but unfortunately there's negative sides to it too.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and college kids can be stupid. I don't always make the best decisions.
True.
Well, Ricardo, we're just about out of time, but I want to ask you this, which I ask of pretty much anyone who comes on this show. Knowing what you know now, what advice would you give your younger self?
Oh, my younger self?
Yeah.
I guess being younger, naive, just being open-minded, more open-minded about things, just looking at trying to look at the bigger picture, and just be positive and open-minded through everything that you see or do or hear there too.
Yeah, and even for you, I mean, you went through a number of career changes, but you started off in the Navy, and then you were in fitness, and now here you are in insurance claims. Like three very different
Totally,
things, but have made you who you are now, and you can approach how you approach claims with all this. You have a varying background that in any way can assist.
Yeah. All of those have kind of helped to shape that and helped me to, even with customers, insureds, they're my team members. I'm able to use all of those tools with them. So,
yeah. I mean, that's one thing I think I love for people to know is like, or I like tell my kids this too, like, just because you want to do this one thing, and you might do that one thing, and you might want to change, and it doesn't make that thing a waste. You
Exactly.
learn something there, and you can utilize what you've learned there onto the next thing. Just, there's no lost opportunity, I guess, or experience. Yeah. Well, Ricardo, thank you so much for sitting down and chatting with Dan and I. I truly appreciate the time that you've taken out of your day and talk about, everything that's been going on in Florida and property. And I know I learned a lot today. So I really appreciate you sitting down and chatting with us.
Thank you.
And for everyone listening, of course, if you like what you hear, please like and subscribe to Claims Never Sleep. You can find us on your favorite streaming platform, as well as YouTube at Claims Never Sleep Podcast. So thanks for tuning in.
This is the Claims Never Sleep Podcast, presented by Cruiser Mitchell, with your host, Meghan Henry.